Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Ayo Kande La Ye Guen Ye Do Kande Raga Jo Za On De Chon Zen Ze She Ye Ya Bo Guen Ye Lo Zan Zha Se Da Je Ma Ne De She Zo Zo De Ye Nan Ga Se De Be De Che Zhe La Ma Ye Be Zong Ga Ta Lo De Be Se Na Xin Zhuan Du De Ba Ye Je Ge Ja Zhu Zo Zo Xie Jie Chen Guen Jia Be De Du Ge Zan Na Be Ge Ju Le Xie So Ta Be Be Ye La Men Ze Be To De Chen Be De La Chan Ze Ye Wo Zhe Ye Na Zo Me Do Da Che Xin Do Be Na Se Che Cha So Wo Sha Ye Zhe Che Jian Ya So Se Na Xin Zhu Jie Lai Che Ba Be Kai Jian Tong May I remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should all participate in this Lamrim discourse, a discourse on the states of the path to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about a page or two from this Lamrim Chemo, the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, volume number 3 in the English translation, page 206, to give you the blessing of lineage, blessings of lineage masters, followed by explication.
요다 제대 징어나 다바나 다바 데나 다베 버서 데레 로중 용 다고 도중 고통 바라 리시 니베 머리메중 리시 머리메중 데네 머리가 보이티 이지를 주의로 주인가 제소 자제라지 예조발이자 머리가 보지바니 디시 나온 군 중문 주로 머리 가버라 주와이 시베 되니르 또 고메서 되다바 되는가 집에 되다 되네 민주라 동해 봉바지 되는다 양다가 지야 소바다 양아 되는다 시세 봉바지 여바 시야수 봉원전 바와 코베 자와 소바다 신디베 되바 이노 파발레 제바 바라니베 룰라노 지야다 코베 자와 남 시에데베 셔서 가라정베 세와 데도 볼로지 오메데주 소가 자고베 바시 제서 바타지 때문에 그게 쉬어나와서 저우트 바바 도다베라시 때가 네 쉬어는 예를 정기에 뭐니면 봤다 제가 이미 마르벤지다 소용아 코니 돈데레바 나자바서 바이 바르부터 팔리탈리 때니 저와죠 저 때발고 바이 이거 지나 셰바 로보토지 투기다니 집에 심지는 동에 나서지 냠바라세네 다 넘버 좋아 셰베셰 고고 나가지 양다 바시다와 히더라디 때바셰바 베테지 저와죠 저 때바상 되야 양다 마이 통화 양다 마이 통화 신 양다 통화 남주와 양다 넘버 바시 고고나 양다 바시다와시 가시 원이와데 미테 미키바테 무기요 밀로로지 미데바니 고보는 원이에데 나바다바데나 달라다다시다 이당타 제바 셰도 강게제 때인저원 좀 시베는 때문고 뭐바세 힘이 셰라지 미기 고보나제 원이 베바니 도마 디잖아 나 네베바 로바티 되자데 셰다 다메죠 셰송지 라제지 저베 삼저데 연데르메 제이베 테바시모 슝루지베 또 다발라 저번에 시에나 어째지베 니데지베 슝루지베 통강 통 담발라 저번에 대시바 마리바 디베 양시지 양 마리지베 양시 해조성이 라제니 디바에 참저데 야마데메바다 치인데 제티바데베데 탈라 탈라 데네 다베 넘버시바 뉴지 데리시반 디베데 노종 총셰 당 셰소 송베 노 러부 상지장 예라 중이제 제 당보 머리방어바랑 정신 도도발라 바시바 당년랑 쉐지 다미 도바라 셰 도바라 셰바라 셀로 대너니랑 라바제제 다음바도 비비드지 두지 셴보니 쉐지 당제 라진지 머르바 요디 바라 셰바 치지 다 흉좀데 데르와 커사 다 니모 탐지나 에네 커사 다 지단 니모 뭐보이라 티나 에네 때무다 에네 커사 셰단다 데자도 그 소소도 믿어보고는 띵나 여자니 뭐 좋아다 이네 샴바고나 에네 셰단요 드라마들이 에네 님보제기야 에네 니모 뭐보 님보시도 말이지 에네 다 ini temu me teme na dame teme ne tigene nimu yoto jo nimu shidoris no kita shia harsa tikaza zamjo tiere this imbadi success de songdo da di juza de sha se de she zo na temu shinda shi yan da temu sa ka re se na ta tiere da temu se de san da jidanga temu se na mishi ba gangal temu se ro da di temu de da dangzi del se go 쟤는 친한 거 쳐도 랑생이 들어봤지 랑시 로드 로디 머리가 인데 시작은 제발이 다에 시버 오버는 뭐 사바도도 봐시바 니모지 미시바 거기 뭐는 샤바데 코와 주비 사본지바 넘버 탄주 가발리 코와도바 넘버 샤고 셰데비 치르셰바 시베서 만남 위는데 주 위라다미토는 시베서 몽가벌 셰시기 셰베 주지 유러시메와 동안에 착베의 넘버 셰바 시베서 원요 넘버 타유 도발리 뉴몬바 당 뉴몬바 당 랑상 인도다 랑상제 당 메제외 쉬了 随吧对比 小于是吧 나는 코완도바 나버 샤고 시송소스 다 거기 데레샤 데모드 가레서는 이 치노 쉬는 가르사 다 거기 랑시 모르시 주반제 비게 말이 바데레스 티바데 가르스는 시잡인 저발이 다와적비 데발이 나버 시바 고보랑 사보 조도 버시바 뉴모지 미시베 엉기스 어디는 뉴모지 미 엉기 ngoba 차바던 denshi sida di demu디 엉기 차바다 나와서 제니 코와주레스 차동 레서 코와주 사보디 켜바 넘버 탐지도 가발레 스타디르 마리보다 가발레 코와도 넘버 샤고스 셰테비 켜와서 제가 되자다 셰다도 코로나서 카드 년보도 셰다 때때 내가 때때 흉주에 뭐도 지고 자완도 동도야 말이지 제가 다음에 또 배는 자원 총으로 실코와 도로 그래서 코와 코디도 유디 머리부터 이제 어디 머리부 방선은 너무 현다 도서 코완도 그래서 제바스 다디 공디 시베서 남게도 유는티 줄을 다음에도 시베서 뭐가 시기베 취지에서 취지 유랑 심해바 통화래 착비교 나바시바 시바 베서부 어디 저바 나바타지 저 도발레 년도다 랑산제 메제쇼로 서바타비 이니 청주세바나 코안도바 나바샤게 히송소 세다테르 와커사 강제 코안도가디 이니 때무디 다미도서는 인디 세와시다도도 코시베 사본리스 제다세다 다딘도 타바타게스르스는 년도시 이니 랑산제시 이니 메제쇼로 서바타와세나 다테르 커사 청주세바 사지바 이지셔워와 세드즈고 다 텐주로스나 인디 사지바디 용저 방고와 혹시 디가가 방조를 소티입니다.
They shall have read from the bottom of page 206 over to page 210. And now he started to give explanation of what he read. So back to page 206. One of the things that we talked about last week is this, that in the case of afflictive emotions such as attachment and anger, there are specific antidotes, for each of them. For example, we can, cultivate love to counteract anger. We can reflect on repulsiveness of things as an antidote to attachment. But these specific antidotes help us to deal with each of these afflictive emotions individually, but they really do not help to uproot these afflictive emotions. However, if we find an antidote to uproot ignorance, avidya or marikpa in Tibetan, then that would be the most effective antidote, because once we uproot ignorance from within our mind, all other afflictive emotions will be eliminated. So it is like cultivating just one antidote that is effective to get rid of all other afflictive emotions. The reason why is all other afflictive emotions such as attachment, anger, jealousy, you just name it, they all arise from ignorance. Avidya is the source, is the what we call fundamental afflictive emotion, or the root afflictive emotion that gives rise to all other afflictive emotions. And so now, then the question arises, if we really need to uproot ignorance, so what is it then? If that is the root of all other afflictive emotions, so what is it? Well, in a very generic sense, ignorance means lack of knowledge, right? Not knowing something. That is ignorance. But in this particular context, ignorance refers to our grasping at intrinsic self. In other words, in Tibetan, Gyeltsen, right? Grasping at intrinsic self is the ignorance in this particular context. As long as we have such a grasping within ourselves, all other afflictive emotions will remain intact and arise, and we get trapped in samsara or cyclic existence. Yeah. So we really need to understand that particular ignorance. So then we say, okay, what is it again? Explain it. What is that grasping? So those of you who have the text in your hand, at the bottom of page 206 over to page 207, that particular ignorance is clarified or defined. As Geshe explained, ignorance is an afflictive emotion that superimposes intrinsic quality or reality onto everything that exists, which we consider as internal phenomena and external phenomena. Everything that exists is a phenomenon or dharma in Sanskrit, chu in Tibetan. And that can be categorized into internal phenomena and external phenomena. But ignorance is an afflictive emotion that superimposes this intrinsic quality onto everything that exists. So which means that everything is perceived as if they exist intrinsically or in and of itself. Okay? So that is the state of mind, ignorance. And that is the kind of grasping that exists within our mind. So we need to really identify that, understand that kind of ignorance. So that explanation of ignorance is based upon great Indian master Aryadeva's 400 verses on the middle view, and as commented upon by great Indian master Chandrakirti in his commentary to Aryadeva's 400 stanzas cited on page 207 right on the top. Okay. So as Geshe explained, that if we can get rid of this particular ignorance, then we would be able to get rid of all other afflictive emotions, attachment, anger, and jealousy, and so on. And so if we uproot that ignorance from within our mind, then we would be liberated, right? We would be free of samsara, or free from samsaric existence. And then you ask, who are the ones who, could be free from samsara by uprooting that particular ignorance? As mentioned in the text here, Shervakas, or the hearers, Pratyuka Buddhas, or the solitary realizers, Rangyal in Tibetan, and the Bodhisattvas. In the case of Bodhisattvas, those who are free from afflictive emotions are the Bodhisattvas on the 10th spiritual ground, right, 8th Dasha Bhumi. According to Prasangika Madhyamika school of thought, philosophy, the highest Buddhist school of thought, Bodhisattvas who are on the 8th spiritual ground, right, 1 to the 8, not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 8, number 8 and above. These Bodhisattvas are free of afflictive emotions or delusions or kleshya. Okay? So there are Shervaka Arhats, or those who liberate from delusions, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, or the solitary realizer Arhats, and Bodhisattvas on the 8th ground and above. These are the ones who are free from that particular ignorance and all other afflictive emotions.
ronju menju ge denzin da dangzi ni kha sha go ba denzin sen che dangzi dangzi sen da kha da sha go ba se ta de jig ba sha go za se ti de denzin she ba yin de lu lu ma she ji se za je da denzin se ge res de de dangzi se ge res kha re se na de res go ta pe na ong bo nge na se na ani lu de na ong bo da ne ong bo se da je ong bo se ong bo so de go ba da lu jang bo se di 제 강갈 찹되어 뭐 그런 로페요 뭐 뭐디 강가 찹되긴 뒤로 어디 나시긴 딘지데 이제 니무 강가 그 자와 찹된 게 거기서 자와려 되죠. 그래서 대부분 내게 되게 니무다 제가 돼서 대부분 좀 just 제가 자와 인자 行着啥界限的过严个没人咋，这目前你们刚刚多住的，是的是吧？
No.
야, 시제비 제발이 때문에 되는 싶다. 대버 또발 몸반이 오버 대배랑 고냠바 도도라도 조고 시대자 머리가 코에 떠와 있는 어디에 다 머리 다 두지 다 머리 봐도 딘디 찍고 샤오이나 이 머리 봐 코에 떠와 있는 직다 코에 떠와라 봤어.
No, so.
진짜 다 코에 떠와디 니데 지다미도 니 캐는 거 말이야. 진짜 대유알이야 직다 코에 떠와 캐는 거다. 딘지 코에 떠와 캐는 거 예와 도시야지. 다 되는 거 이노 죽바도 식세디 직다 코에 떠와 시와 베데디 또 유지메베 시로 시로다 코에 떠와 머리를 써야 되라. 지나미도 니 용거 말. 지나 찍고 그래. 시로와. 제가 거기 가가려 와서는 지는 세월다.现在马这把当今天许多农民现喜欢这个嘛，但现在农民当中不容易没这个个经济抗杀当时下，是吧？电视的也确实是这个是吧？他能这个，看他把那大瓦车路上，他天就多没路了，那电视的当时几块小的，看见他确实有关的抗杀当时确实当时给什么就。각자 지과 샤모도 수의당들 가자다 가자 가요 말아. 제가 찍샤다. 에 말이 거긴 지담이 되어요 말. 미국은 샤림이 지담이 되면서 거기서 니요비 좀요 말이 있어다.
So we are in the middle of page 207. So here ignorance is considered as the root afflicted emotion, is the root of samsara or cyclic existence. And another terminology that's being used to equate with ignorance is the denzin, grasping at true existence, literally translating. So grasping at true existence and ignorance are synonyms in this particular context. Now kind of issue has been raised sort of in a philosophical context here, because according to Sevatantiga Madhyamikan school, the middle way school, that's called Sevatantigan, and the schools below, so they make a distinction between what we call grasping at self and grasping at phenomena. Okay, grasping at phenomena is considered as grasping at true existence. Grasping at self is the grasping at self of a person. Okay, so for them it's not working when we say that ignorance and grasping at true existence are synonym, one and the same thing. They say no, because there's a grasping at phenomena, there's grasping at the self, so they think that Prasangikas, as if Prasangikas are talking about two root causes of samsara. They say, there could only be one root cause of a samsara. How could you have two? Because you have a grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of a phenomena. This is two things. If something were to be a root cause of samsara, it would have the same mode of apprehension of whatever the X is, right? So they cannot have two different modes of apprehension of what that is, So there cannot be two root causes of samsara. Are you with me so far? Hope I'm not confusing you here with all my languages here. Okay. But the Prasangika Madhyamikans represented by great Indian Master Chandrakya, they say, we don't have that problem. Okay. What we are saying is that ignorance and grasping at true existence is synonym. Because, yes, we do talk about grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of phenomena, but as a grasping, they're exactly the same thing. They have the same mode of apprehension. As a basis, it's different. One is self of a person and one is self of phenomena. So from the objective point of view, or I should say from the basis point of view, I've got to be careful with the objective one here. From the basis point of view, there are two, but from the subjective point of view, it's just the same. So therefore, there is no problem in our system that there are two causes of the root of samsara, right? That's just one cause, which we call it ignorance or grasping at self, grasping at true existence. All of these things mean the same thing to us. Yeah. Whereas in the Sevatandika Madhyamikan school, the middle way school, sub-school, and schools below, because their distinction of the grasping at the self of a person and grasping self phenomena are very different. Okay? For them, grasping at the self of a person is the kind of ignorance, right? Grasping at self. Whereas the grasping at the self of phenomena is grasping at true existence. You know, they make that distinction. Whereas Prasangika said, we ain't got that problem here. Okay, so you figured that one out, so that's the distinction we need to understand. And the texts that substantiate that point are cited in the middle of page 207. We have Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, and then we have Chandagiri's commentary to Aryadeva's 400 stanzas.
Mariba jigde shidu lobon shenji sheba ta te jeje desha sheba ni jibu deng ka she sin se ta ngad jibu dong shidu tan la kar sen raja ta ene da je ba ti khoya cha sha ni ti gong do wa ti she sa se khonsa dang se ya jigda se ti wa jibu deng ko ene dang si khoya cha le dang si dang ja se je ti she wo wa ro ti she se ba yin se wa There lobon dawa trabe sheba ta kare de jigwa marese. Omo shen nam hito di ta omo shen jan ta this word da dinzin se ade in hito bin se word da dawa trabe lo san da teju lo yungro bin se word wa. What is word da? Lobon shen hito di she ngobo demban zemban ni marikbar shela se dire da in dinzi marikbar shegres nimuje marikbar da dia te nimuje marikbar shede nga tang ba da hijaben jabale nimu le kharsa jabale nimuje di shejing hijaben jawaj jungde le ja disimji no sheda nebe ngobo no Tawala, Mama Shiva, Demude, Maribu, Rangu, Yovama, Dondo, Sheva, Rahito, David, then you go to Shed, the Tedder, Siva, and La News Davis. Sida, Siva, and Las, the Yella Junior, Washita, Yella Junior, and the Kavala, Tomu, Maribu said, Daisy Shagres, Daisy Santa, Dangzis and Ataka, Sheva Jiva, Jiva, or the Shagres. Maripa, Dang. Gundo ina namba shao she tende juni yana tambu shebe na sheda tende yana juni na tomo mariba se thi da khoya tsa tende yana juni na tomo mariba de khoya tsa imbe de ta nangwe du da ga jik ba re jo no so she na mariba khona ngun ji du kha ga sho ro wa o te mo te jik ba re da imbe na shebe na nimu ji nimu ji shete me no sheda khoya tsa gi Oti dan in the Karsa Nundo Rima, the heater Maris, Rava, Koyasala, the Nundo Shagma, Ravaranji Magangati, Shagmeta, or Nundo mean Karsa heater means. Tan heater mare was in a when he said they were condition, they were the Tom and Joe Rose, that is the heater said that that Tenjo Lola Direta, heater said that Nimuja Maibi Marie said. Paksa so ji pe chong ji ma do bi dire ya ka denzi sha ma re ta tile ji da di ka ye hi ba ji ye sin me se yi ja me de be yo ri ti ta sin pe ji je mo ji sung sin na yi sin te ni ta ni mu je mai be ma ri be se di hi ba me la ko ta ha ji ne ba do ji ma do yo ma re
shebe ma res paksa res no
la
shi ri ko sheba che go ma paksa
the Yoda to get this or Taganzoya and Shansaji and the Dajba and the Konzo Ganga Sina and the Damido Hato said, no, this on the Ronaji, don't show Mare, or the Tony Shuya shit of Inshore.
Can't just on
They don't show Hana, they don't know.
I'll touch my number.
Karana, they don't know each other. Said that they don't know that they don't mind none of the Jones Shara.
I'll tell you 22 now.
That usual Mare. Or didn't hear a lot. Or the heater is your. This was Karsa. Here the dead of the civilian used the Yumaji Maripa Ongi, Kundo, the Banamba Shah, say. She didn't 시대 메뉴 오늘 시대 관계는 오 동 스타트 무엇이 되는 연락 중에 더부 머리 봐 이제 코에 자와 임발라스 직자연 코에 자와 임바 시원이 시원이 머리 버제도 시작 에 직자연비 요함에도 스타트인데 ene jigsa khoye tsawa shewa da ene dinzi khoye tsawa shewa ni yawa dugla arwa tsawe ode tik yawa yawa maris jigda sene shita jires dinzi sene da chu khare ni ganga chu ina dinzi she da dinzi jigda dinzi kyawu arwa sheta ti jiso da ene jigda sene ene khasa ding chu sha jires dinzi sene chu tamji ding sha ji ko ji shita ji ma du jinang yawa yawa maris
al jigda de kyan khasa 강마 쉐고 말베
직다스데 khoza mi shang marwa dinzi sha di shu sam je shang rawa she to jigda dinzi ni che shi ta re de rawa she da yo yo mar sko jigda khoye tsawa yi she ba de dinzi khoye tsawa yi she ba ani yo yo mar jigda khoron de ni dinzi re de rawa
모습 로 쳐고 봐 된지 있는 수 맞아 sorry that was quite long but I'll manage it. So we are on page 208, and what Geshe explained is that in the context of middle scope practitioner or intermediate level practitioners, Yibu Ding, Lama Tsongkhapa says we already talked about what is called grasping at self of a person, already there, okay, in that particular context. And so now one of the issues relating to the grasping, at true existence, Tenzin, is that some masters consider grasping at true existence, Tenzin, as cognitive obscuration, and that's obscuration to omniscient knowledge, Shidip in Tibetan. Okay? And if something were to be the root cause of a samsara, it would have to be a delusion, afflictive emotion, right? Afflictive emotion. So therefore, they said, grasping at true existence is a cognitive obscuration, so therefore it cannot be the root cause of samsara. Okay? But according to Pasangikas, represented by Chandrakirti, they said, no, that grasping at true existence is a delusion, is afflictive emotion. We do not regard that as a cognitive obscuration or shedip. Are you with me, the distinction? Okay. Let's keep all those things, clearly in separate orders. Okay. And so therefore, when we look at the 12 links of interdependent origination, right, that helps us to explain how, my first footnote, how we come into samsara. The first link in the 12 chains, the first one is the ignorance, avidya, marigba. Okay? So all the Buddhist schools of thought, tenets, agree that ignorance is the root cause of samsara. Everything else follows from that, all Buddhist schools. But what ignorance is, now Buddhist schools of thought might have difference in opinion, right? Well, we think this is this, we think that's that, So in terms of what ignorance is, avidya, Buddhist schools of thought might have different explanation, but they all agree that ignorance is the root cause of samsara. So as a matter of fact, it is the number one, the top of the list of the 12 links of interdependent origination. So as Geshe explained, so according to Sevatandika, Madhyamika schools below, for them grasping at true existence, is more like the cognitive obscuration. Okay, whereas for Prasangika, it is afflictive emotion or delusion. So for Prasangika, grasping at self, or grasping at true existence, grasping at intrinsic existence, ignorance, all of them are just different terms, but they all mean the same thing. Okay, there isn't any problem here. Okay. And so if that's the case, then somebody says, okay, if grasping at true existence is afflictive emotion, then what do you consider as a cognitive obscuration for you, right? What is shedip for you? So there's again debate about that, but as Geshe explained it, clearly, that according to Pasangikas, cognitive obscuration is not an awareness, it's not a perception, it is just an imprint, latencies, predispositions. The Tibetan term is pakcha, right? It is an imprint of something, right? it is referred to as that which is not a delusive obscuration. I know we get into it, right? How it's like that which is not afflictive emotion is one way of defining what is cognitive obscuration. Okay, and so it is not an awareness. It's not a perception. It's not a part of a mind. It's an imprint. Okay, and this imprint does exist, as Geshe explained. That even in the case of the arahats, those have completely destroyed afflictive emotions, right? They are free from samsara, but still phenomena appear to them as truly existent. They have the non-conceptual realization of emptiness or ultimate reality as it is, because they have seen the truth as it is. That being said, still phenomena appear to them as truly existent. Why? Because they got the imprint still in the mind. That is the pakcha. That is the cognitive obscuration. Okay.
The Marik Pakcha, Marik Bani Rigbe Dojo in the Rigba and Kong Chung la Meshaye, Da maybe take on the Rigbe Sherabos, Direta, Marik Dojo, the Marik Basenata Madon Mishiba de Rava, Tin Dojo de la. And the Mishiba Tam de Maris, Tin Dojo, Shingi the Shawara, the Rigba Gishna,
Right.
Shiva, Toba.
Right.
Or the Rigba, that tell I you talk the log and got a dick and the Rigba get the Revesina Maris, Ravata, Metavata, so anything you got off says, or the dick and any Rigba hit the Maris. The Rigba get has a Dagme Toby, any Shiva Shavres.
No,
So this Rigba is a dead Yagres.
no, so.
Tin Dojo, share up the Mevas, that in Dojo, the any Karsa. Marik Basia del any Madom Tagana Marik Baraves and the Maris Tin Dojo Taka any Rangi Trubazevasana, Da, Dembatruba Zingi, Dojo, Tony got the Dembatruba Shagra, or only don't go the Moto Dora. That in Dojo Taka Gaza Karas Dembatruba, just a Maribas Dembatruba Zingi Lot Shagres, could they may Mato any Dinzi Shagmaris. Or Demba Zingi Lot Shagma, they may Mato Sanko in the Mariba Shagma, Mariba Sen, any Damita Shara Uti Dojo Gaza. In the Dembatruba Lotel and that come the Mariba Shagres, Genda Midisho Zaldua, or then get at the Shagres.
So we are on page 208, right on the top of second paragraph from the bottom up, where the paragraph starts with ignorance is the opposite of knowledge. There is ignorance is the opposite of knowledge, and this does not refer to just any knowledge, and so on. Okay, as Geshe gave the explanation here, that marikpa, ignorance or avidya, and the wisdom that we talk about in this context are antithetical to each other. Okay. If marikpa is defined as not knowing something, then knowing something is antidote, right? Antithetical, right? To know or to not to know are this, right? Direct antithetical to each other. But here again, we are not talking about any kind of a knowledge or wisdom. Okay? We are talking about a very specific kind of a knowledge or a wisdom that is antithetical to a particular kind of ignorance here. Okay? And so what we're really talking about here is, again, ignorance is not simply lack of knowledge in this particular case. It's not like not knowing selflessness or emptiness is not ignorance here. Ignorance in this particular case is a very active awareness, if I can tell, right? It is seeing reality as intrinsically existent. It's that active. It's not like simply not knowing something, right? It is actively perceiving reality as intrinsically existent. So that is the grasping at true existence, intrinsic reality. That's kind of ignorance. So the kind of wisdom that is antithetical to this is not any kind of a wisdom, not like wisdom realizing impermanence. Well, that is a wonderful wisdom, but that's not an antidote, antithetical to this ignorance. Or the wisdom realizing the preciousness of human life, right? How meaningful, how rare, how, that is a wonderful wisdom, but that's not, again, antithetical to this particular ignorance. So the wisdom that is antithetical to this particular ignorance is a wisdom that realizes selflessness or lack of true existence or lack of intrinsic reality, isn't it? Because ignorance is actively perceiving, if you will, intrinsic reality. The wisdom that can cut through that ignorance has to be a wisdom that actively perceives the lack of intrinsic reality or the emptiness of intrinsic reality, isn't it? So that's how they can be buddy, I'm just kidding, antithetical, antidote there. So that's the kind of wisdom and ignorance we are talking about in this particular context.
다도 봐 인라 대양 쉐이다 봐 강사다 인비 쉐이단지데 강사게 게 당지니까 마르바 이노스 다타네 데르바 카르사 마르바세야 코레 코 마시브섬 셰그 마르스티 독조 리바이기 독조 타다 셰그리스 라르바 어티셰드 다디카르스 네 데르세테네 ene dad rodo basio ta khansa de chul dad rodo nge te ene marik basya ta di kan de marik se de ti rodo de ene marik basya res ta di chöje ko de ba chi be ene khansa dang ji da chö gi dang ji ni re res jidan le che yo marwa chöje ko ni sha re so di in sa re
So the kind of ignorance we have here is a very sort of a robust kind of active ignorance. It is it's a really very intrusive one. That it's not just a lack of a knowledge or not understanding something. It's a very robust, active ignorance of superimposing, intrinsic reality onto things. It's a very active ignorance. And what it does is that it superimposes intrinsic reality onto a person, the self of a person. It superimposes intrinsic reality onto the self of phenomena. So that's why we often talk about grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of a phenomena. Okay? These two types of grasping. But from subjective point of view, these two graspings have the same mode of apprehension. They simply see whatever the self is as intrinsically existent. There is no difference in that. From the basis point of view, they're different, right? One is a person, one's a phenomena. So anybody can see that. There's two things. When a person and phenomena are two different things, right?
The teacher, Jigda Nimuji, Shentanji, Zawa Demana, Mariba Zawa Madem, Karsa, Zawa Madempa, Mahilas, Sheda, and Jigda Koyazawa said, the Maribu Koyazawa said, the one government was, Maribu said, Jigda Kora Maribu Radio, take any Goyo Maris. She's a Pumbonzi, but Tizitil and Anzi, you just Che Dadu Bombes, Mariba Kanza, Dadu, Mombi, Gyeltsen na, Mariba no Pin Kasa, Nanzeni, Yunjus, Rosito Bena, Jita Mariba Shembe, Yumuji, Zawateba, Langawa Metos, or Tira, she's a Pumbonzi, Tizikanzi, is the Kanji, the night. Ngayizime jikta de yona, ene karishina dangsi de yodo is rawa. Oti yona, she dad mon base mariba kansa tatire. Tanda marib she dangsi da ene kansa dangsi ni na di ta geve rimba shina. En tangbo ene she dangsi geve se rawa. Kar she dangsi geda karisa kansa lui ji damo pungpo lo sha ene kansa sha go rawa. Cheta pungpo lo she dangsi ge rawa. So that the Kansa law, and the Kansa Danji or Shadow Jesus, Kuni Karsa Dres, Nika Mariba Nanzeni race. That Nanzen that gave very much in the tree dancing in Kansa than teach you Gores. Your Gores. So the Queen you Maribani Nanzen to Junta Tomala and the Telia, Jita Koya them with the Mario Koya Temple and Gava Maris.
I think something I learned from previous explanation, which comes back again here, is where in the Middle-based school of thought, they use another terminology called jigta, which is simply translated literally as the view of perishing aggregates. Well, I don't have any better option, so I have to repeat that. So I don't know how much meaning it conveys. I don't know, but jigta, the Tibetan term is jigta, the view of perishing aggregates and ignorance are the same thing. The view of perishing aggregates is ignorance, isn't it? So when we say that the view of perishing aggregates or jigta is the root cause of samsara, they are not saying that ignorance is not the root cause of samsara, or they're not saying that there are two root causes of samsara. It's just, it's the same thing. The view of perishing aggregates is a part of ignorance, or it is ignorance. Earlier, Geshe explained that the view of perishing aggregates, is grasping at true existence. But every case of grasping at true existence does not necessarily have to be the view of perishing aggregates. I know, now I'm going to confuse you there. Because the view of perishing aggregates is based upon the self of a person, isn't it? But every case of grasping at true existence does not have to be dependent on the self of a person. Right? Does that clarify? So the view of perishing aggregate, jigta, is necessarily grasping at true existence. Every case of grasping at true existence, tenzin, does not necessarily have to be the view of perishing aggregates. Oh my gosh, the whole mantra is there. So we said that. Okay. And as Geshe explained, now we said in the case of grasping, there are two kinds. Grasping at the self of a person and grasping at self of phenomena. Okay. But in terms of which one comes first, arises in our mind, it is the grasping at the self of phenomena that arises first, and the grasping at the self of a person comes next. Looks like there is a cause and effect relationship, isn't it? Grasping at the self of a phenomena said, here I am, and then it says, well, look at what I did. Here's a grasping at the self of a person. Why grasping at the self of a phenomenon arises first is because for us to be able to have the notion of what person is very much dependent upon the person's aggregates, isn't it? Aggregates constitute phenomena. So grasping at self of phenomena arises first because notion of person is contingent upon the aggregates. So the grasping at self of person comes next. Yeah.
That level you go back to the Sheva, the Koya Sheva, give 放线就告我是，我记得他，这种就这么用作的，这可以早些的这条个么，可以早没地方你小个嘛是吧？我的小个没子，但是看啥当的去当的，你经常这块啥话的呢？你去当的可以早，看啥当的你到可以早一些，但经常没得你下着是吧？但用没些这些呢？但是到这边路了，你。第一，这些人嘛，都是经常给要嘛是，老早大个连下刚开始要嘛是吧？我快早节目都下过嘛的是。哦，这些，他这他们嘛的吧，我就路，我们路就些吧，因为他到这边送下的，新加坡他我们哎呀的话，到这边去，他因我们路就送过的，我们路就我们的，是因为看的是呢，东西都是吧，是吧？ 有的见了结果杨大班的到吧个，天的东北马人是天来人了中英雄，杨大东西我当吧，利息马人民众，哇，天的马人搞吧伊，天这人了就应该接送形式，这些哩，不接你这过来就马人搞吧叫那这些，那个中民就是马人搞吧。 Churba ne hive tingi gombe so start long te to sheda ene maru gaba churu sidan sheda da di dinzi de maru ba yin be de ene sa he da ene rigba chuji ba da o de gangal song sha sheda di da ba den da song ya di chigba re go ro chigba re de gobol ro gomba da da res ene do da o ma na yin de be jigda da maru ba yin de 제다 미디 부셔겨 말이지. 지나 찍바레스. 어디서 와라? 어디서 와죠? 제가 데리 이는 고벌로 고범마 메바레스. 뒤에에 짜시에다 리바 주지발 송샤 시라와. 어디입니다.
So Geshe is giving explanation on the passage you find at the bottom of page 208 and over to page 209. So if we don't understand, what has just been explained, then people would not understand the real intention of the Prasanga Madhyamika school, as if they are asserting two root causes of samsara. They are not. Okay, they may use different terminology. They can say like grasping at true existence, and grasping is of two kinds, grasping at the self of a person, grasping at the self of phenomena. But in reality, from subjective point of view, as we said, these two forms of grasping have the same mode of apprehension of self, because they both see the self as intrinsically existent. So from that point of view, the root cause of the samsara is just one. In all schools of thought, Buddhist schools of thought, they all agree ignorance or avidya is the root cause of samsara. And Prasangikas very much agree with that. They have no problem. The issue that seems to be happening here is in the lower schools of thought, they started to make a distinction between ignorance and, let's say, grasping at true existence, or the view of perishing aggregates, jigda, right? Because those are not one and the same thing. So for them, if you say that these both are causes of samsara, root cause, they say, well, now you are saying true root cause of samsara. How can you dare? How dare you say that? There's only one, right? They just kind of become, that argumentative in a sense. But from Chandrakirti and Prasangika's point of view, whether we say it is the view of perishing aggregates, or whether we say grasping at the true existence, from subjective point of view, the mode of apprehension of the reality is the same. It's intrinsic reality. So therefore, root cause of the samsara is nothing but one. It is the ignorance. So there is no problem with that. So that explanation given by great Indian master Aryadeva in the 400 verses, and the great Indian master Chandrakirti explicating what the Aryadeva said, all of those things really capture the view of Arya Nagarjuna. Right, because Arya Nagarjuna is the one, who elucidated the view of emptiness or selflessness. So as you can see on page 209, we have a citation from Arya Nagarjuna's 70 stanzas on emptiness, right? Tongyi Tunchu in Tibetan. And we have a citation from Arya Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika, or the Fundamental Treatise, the 26th chapter. So all those citations, they substantiate the point that grasping at true existence, or the ignorance and the view of transitory collection are one and the same thing. The view of transitory collection is a particular kind of ignorance because it's focused on the self of a person. But the ignorance means a very generic term. The grasping at true existence is more of a generic term. But in reality, they have the same mode of apprehension of the self, intrinsic reality. So therefore, they're all grasping at true existence, and they constitute the root cause of samsara.
Dungi Pumanga, Maribag team of Tosana, Tia Gomna, and Muslim Josan, and Dungi Pubangan, Tawata Siajurodi, Sahi Shia did any Pabala Shia did Sibare Shas, or Tirava. Here's some but Pumbo Koyas or some by the Hindu Tumba, Juba, Pavali Shiba in Bani, Lulu Luanshi can do sit, and Lulu Luanshi, the Mariba Zati the Tawati is Mariba in the Luigi Ongbody, Carsa Luigi Ongbody, Ongo Hinga, Lord, Kanga Chap the Nation. Or did you don't Mariba the end Nimu Shenda Ganga Chapters, that you move Savi, you move to Nino Yisa, the Mambo Kazi, Mena, Kanji Mariba Zawadi, there is. No, so the Nimu Shenda, the Kizan Siana, he said, any country was a welcome to country in Gochagri, Magitio, and Deja, Metabagon, Deja, Gochagri mother. And Nimu Shenda mixing was Pendo Maris. Then in the Dagmate Gomsana, in Nimu Ganga did sound children, say, what did you go to whatever? No,
so what Arya Nagarjuna has stated in his fundamental treatise on Mulya Madhyamika or Umazawa Shera is exactly what the Chandrakirti has, and the Aryadevas have explained here, which is if we can precisely identify ignorance as the root cause of samsara, okay, and we are able to see that the referent object, shenyul in Tibetan, of grasping at true existence, right? What's the referent object grasping true existence, or intrinsic reality, right? So that doesn't exist. It's not something existent, right? So if we understand that the referent object of such a grasping is non-existent, that will help us to put an end to the suffering, when we put an end to the suffering, the result we get is nirvana, the liberation, isn't it? So that explanation is as Nagarjuna illustrated in his fundamental treatise and as explained by Chandrakirti and Aryadeva. And as Geshe explained this, I think earlier there was a citation, probably I forgot to refer you to that, where it's mentioned that when we think in terms of our sensory faculties, the tactile sensory faculty, right, the body faculty we call it to be easy, it pervades all other faculties. It pervades the visual faculty, auditory faculty, all other faculties, isn't it? Yeah. In the same way, ignorance pervades all other afflictive emotion delusions. Okay? And so if you want to uproot all delusions, you have to uproot ignorance, because ignorance pervades to all other afflictive emotions. Once ignorance is gone, all other afflictive emotions are gone. Yeah, it's sort of like if you damage the tactile faculty, it will probably damage all other sensory faculties, And so the example is, if you don't want a particular plant to grow again, you should uproot it, don't trim it, it'll come back, just uproot it. So just like that, if we want to get rid of all afflictive emotions, we have to uproot the ignorance, which pervades all other afflictive emotions. And what can help us to do that is not any kind of antidote, but it is the realization of selflessness, emptiness. That is antithetical to this particular ignorance. Remember, we talked about this quite a bit earlier. With other afflictive emotions, there are particular antidotes, right? With impatience, patience is the way to go. Okay. With obsessive attachment, think about the repulsive nature of things. It'll calm you down a little bit, won't make you freak out. He didn't say that, but still, these are temporary antidotes, right? They really don't uproot your obsessive attachment, or they don't, get rid of impatience altogether. But they help you, situationally. But you really want to get rid of obsessive attachment, anger, impatience, everything, then you really have to realize the selflessness, because it will knock out the ignorance, which will knock out all other afflictive emotions, So that's the way to go,
this is a Lobo Jomedanjus, Gazago, requesting some Tamji Chang. Demu Chen Rang Mutuba, Rotabe, Ranhidikan, She, Shena, Ranhi Meba, Rangu Mebatamba, Jeva Imba, Maribi Zinasun or Connie, to the Ribanas of Sumba Imba. Butapalita, less, that low little country, Omar Risotto, any big. Demidoya requested resources to us, Ribo Mawson was the Lobo Ribo Mawson, the garrison, and that the same time she became coin of the end of the new Sawati Mariba to Shazati Mariba to Kaya Tondala in Lobo in the Lome Exotic song race. River, the Lobo Yanki so well governs your mare, Pamia, the Rankia, the day in Kulunga, Marisimo. Timaiva exude decay Javisana in the Sanji Jackassiva.
No, so.
Butapa, ten Joa just a Tambala, Gova Church, Lobo Little Gano, Risotoni Yard, ten Joa, Omeri Patti Dea Caresena, Lobo took 7 Danisians, says a Lobo de Sajus of Tuesday Danisians, Simsian of Dumelia Toya Tondala. In Songres, Dunga Toyala, Dunga saw Mariway, Maribabangura, Tipang was what the Mari was singing and Omeri Patti Songres.
No, sir.
Dunga Nato Yamba saying, Teta number 2, Cherry, Novo Nam, Yang Tapashita, she rubbed the temper at Shebe, then in Javajo, just temper someday. Any that 10 days and that, don't you do a request that shows you the water? Or someday Yanda Casa Yanda, my in Tonga ye, Yanda Tonga number 2. Here's soon be sure was that year the Dame the Tonsana in the call to do it, Dame the mother of it, call to your maris. Or did totally rebutting song is what that decisions are. The Sanji Jangi, Lobo Gombati.
So as Geshe explained earlier, that just as tactile sensory faculty pervades all other sensory faculties, in the same way, ignorance pervades all other delusions, afflictive emotions. Sometimes when we go into the classifications of delusions, we can talk about 6 fundamental delusions, the 20 secondary delusions, and then the whole list of other delusions. But it doesn't matter how many there are. Ignorance rules all over them. So if ignorance gets uprooted, all of them are gone. Okay, so that's the bottom line and the point we made. And so now Geshe gives explanation on the things. You find it at the bottom of page 209 over to 210. And so which is that what Aryadeva and Chandrakirti, all of them are doing is they're trying to really illustrate illustrate the reality, or the explain the graspings at true existence, just exactly like Arya Nagarjuna has explained, right? So they're trying to do that. And Arya Nagarjuna or Gombaluduv has how should I say authored 6 collected works we call Riksok Tru. Okay, 6 collected works of reasonings, if you will. And in all of those works, Nagarjuna has given so many how should I say valid reasonings and analytical analysis, right? And it's not like because he loves argumentation and he has nothing better to do, right? So he started arguing right and left. That's not his job. The whole purpose of giving all kinds of reasonings and evidence, including the dependent arising as a reasoning, Pratitsamudbad, is because Nagarjuna loves sentient beings and he wants to see all sentient beings be free from samsara. So that's his whole agenda there. Okay. Then how do we know that's Nagarjuna's agenda? Well, another great Indian master, Buddhapalita, by his name, and his work is called Buddhapalita. So in that, he explained that. So that's on top of page 210, as Geshe explained. It says, what is the purpose of teaching dependent arising? Why Nagarjuna has taken the pains to explain Pratitsamudpad, tender, dependent arising. Okay, it's because Nagarjuna wants all sentient beings to be free from suffering of samsara, and to be free from suffering of samsara, they must uproot ignorance because they have in this grasping at the intrinsic reality of phenomena and things, right? So what can help to counteract that grasping is the realization of dependent arising, how everything exists dependently, not intrinsically, right? So that's the whole purpose of Arya Nagarjuna explaining the notion of dependent arising. So as you find it stated on the top of page 210, I quote, "Seeing what is not real, you are bound. Seeing the real, you are free," unquote. As Geshe explained, if we see selflessness or emptiness, tagme, we will be free. If we don't see the selflessness, as long as we don't see it, realize it, then we will be bound. Then we are trapped, isn't it? So our way to liberation or to freedom is to realize, selflessness.
ngōpa yāng tāpa xie tā kāng yīn xie pa ngō nī pa nī xie mī kē pa tēmū kūmō pa tā tēsī wā kāng xie ngōpa kā yīni kōr nī xie tā xie mā xie pa xie yīni rāng cīng chūpa sā na rāng xie chūpa zē pa tēmū tā tēni yīni kā tēsī kā rēsī kār sā kī wē kā tēmū kī mūmbē xie tēmū mūmbē xie tēmū kōnā kī lō chū mī kī dē pa nī xie tā tēmū tī shūk xie pa yō tā yīni tī 도저 게 라메 통한테 데르고 어디 데르다 고바도 고니 나보다 봤어 제가 고바 가래 통해서 나 데바트와레 상대는 어디 혹시 뭐 용거지 뒤에서 데틀라 때는 샤힌이 경고를 도자 코로 간가 경고를 딘데지세는 네 어디 레사는 코코네 다 가지 통모마네 코리에서 거로 코르서 코리스 제가 뒤다 코알이야 노라 이니 good 마선 도가 메자 티자 이드 마르고 손자 인 텐도는 인 현다가가 도 영화로 힘 자와지는 영가 강가 감르고 어디 지고 손자 인 고벌로 오메 가서 인 베 마르바 힘 수용하디 리바 제바르 송고야 주젠데 데레시고서와
No, so we're on top of page 210 still. And so the problem, those of us who are in samsara or korva, is that we really don't see how everything actually exists. We don't see that reality as it is. As a matter of fact, we actively, misperceive the reality as intrinsically existent. Okay, so that's our issue or the problem, And so because of that, we have strong grasping at intrinsic reality or true existence. And as if we got plunged into this darkness of ignorance, isn't it? So when the ignorance is too strong, our wisdom becomes quite weak. The ignorance overpowers the wisdom. Wisdom is the kind of feeble there, kind of I'm here, but I'm not here kind of thing, it's there. So that's the problem. And so because of that ignorance, that active ignorance we have, superimposing intrinsic reality onto things, that all other affective emotions arise. We experience them. Now we have attachment. Now we have anger and hostility. Now we are really rich in all that delusional, display here. And because of all these affective emotions arising, they influence us, to do the negative karmas, isn't it? That's how we accumulate, negativities or unwholesome actions. And unwholesome actions always bring problem, suffering. That's their result, isn't it? So this is how, we get suffering, nothing but suffering, and more suffering, So that's our storyline there. And so now, if we don't want, suffering and suffering forever, then we have to really uproot the root cause of the suffering, which is back to the basic ignorance, isn't it? That active ignorance of superimposing intrinsic reality onto things. And so to do that, we have to understand dependent arising. So that's why Nagarjuna has, done his best to master all kinds of reasonings and analytical tools, to help us to be able to understand, how everything actually exists, how we actively misperceive, apprehend, things to exist intrinsically. So maybe it's a good thing to stop there for today, and we welcome your questions. Yeah. Yes. Carlos, go.
All right. I'm just wow. So I'm just using. This is pretty intense, actually, just to cover this. So really, yeah. So in my own practices, though, I guess I'm just trying to understand this with what to my own practices, and so so the object, usually sometimes that I'll use, and this is very silly, but it's very still, it's a hamburger, actually.
Okay, yes.
So I mean, there's so many other ones that I can use, but usually when I start engaging in this, these feelings arise immediately. Really, I mean, once I see the hamburger, it's just all of a sudden it's the feelings, and I guess you would call those the mental affliction. So the grasping, just the savor, like the flavor of the hamburger, just this kind of like this wanting of this food, starts arising, and so there it's interesting because I get kind of stuck because I'm trying to see where is the ignorance? Is it? I mean, it sounds like, yeah, where does the ignorance lie? I guess in between that, because I mean, yeah, but it sounds like it's really these feelings that arise. They're only afflictive emotions. It sounds like, and so I really have to go into the how I'm perceiving the food, right? I mean, that's where where it is,
I'll
right?
ask him, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Actually, you gave a very relatable, example. I can go with that burgers, why not? 고랑근데 쉬어야 되겠다. 식지데 고랑 계제데 접중차로 지금도 살아봐. 다 되는 게인데 송주의 야구 년바로 와게. 당가 정부변에 주디 가서가라 저다 가서 그렇게 마리베 왕 진다 지체로 와게. 지도 갈 답변 고랑을 차샤와 있나서 와게. 다 단다디 요바게 샤발레 요바게 햄버거. 다디 세디오 갈 거지 가서랑 신기다 딜이야 가서 이나 수수기다 가서 산데다 다 지금 너바다 여러와게 참고 먹고 게임도 저러와게 지도가 니가 내가 들이야 그 머리부터 가와를 지연하러 와게 자 삼을 고로 와게 다 니데 제다 디기 다 코랑이 단다 디 가서 당가 저희는 요모는 데베 초와 디게 되냐면 동네 제리야 pena kap delia ta samro skande tang gor sar wage pena da pena shabale de wage ta chowa da de shu cha de wage di shin bu shu stu da de ji sam de gor wage da ga rang gi ko ne ju da mang bu sam tang go khar che go sar sar ge
shabale la chakbaje 지고
no ta sabale sa ya la ko na ka bu shu ji ore di chakba ge de wage so de ge de shimru go wage ya
de wa karsa this is ta nga se jidan ni kana 캡산도 가가디 갈고야세 예세 여러와다 가랑 투바싱이 버시도
나래
지스데타 dobje이나레 둘로인데 가리나 소소 고야지 밀리케저스케요 말와
나래
어디 셴바셴부디에서 에네 샤파레 시리자나 에네 코라비게 히모르세 단도 시바 슈크셔도니 디시아디 가레세나 딘진디 슈가가시 슈크셔부예서 디지 에네 코 셴바셴도 고리스거라 다 딘지메나 pendra chermo se ando nindo daje masa digo hela di chuo di ngando khala sa dang de khonde hela se don chibo marwa o dere kodo da lu cho di ta da de mo gi tinde himlo da inde sigin yo marwa o di sigin mo ya de gares nugo dangji di daje masa dangji yo marwa o digi shewa.
So what Geshe can say is that in that particular case, right, where we are, in the sense that it really, I think, indicates that with your example that, the kind of how strong the grasping at self that we have existing inside us. It's not so much about hamburger, it's the grasping. Because of that grasping at the self, we cherish the self so much, right? We want the best of everything in the world, at its feet, so to speak, and hamburger is just part of that, right? And so it shows us, the how much grasping, we had at self, and that from which arises this attachment to the hamburger, whatever other things can be, so otherwise, let's say in the case of arahats, those who are free of the afflicting emotions, if they eat hamburger, they won't have the same problem as we do, isn't it? They don't have attachment because they're all free of delusions, everything. So they could still enjoy the hamburger, but they don't have that, the deluded experiences that we have. So ours is more is indicative of our grasping at the self and and then cherishing it that much. Yeah.
So in that situation, so it's I thought that would be grasping at phenomenon, not necessarily grasping at self.
Oh, okay.
Is that what it is
Okay,
then?
good.
Self, and how is?
Well, that helped. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
get back to you. That's good.
That's interesting to hear.
알레 코로나 삼라겐 다단다 데 삼르당 번다 단다 갱게 소면 거 샤발레 사데 되고 그 조데타 소소리아 달 셴베 짐바디 슈셴베 라브로 와게 테카 데 코로나 삼데 삼데 그래서 디네 마르베사 페나 단다게 샤발레 데 시부 차데요 와 제 최고 당진으로 차게요 말해서 와게 그 착사데 샤발레 데 차데요 와게 제가 디 최고 당진으로 차고 말해서
최 당진 뜻이보다 내가 당진도 다 최 당진에는 이게 지단 지기다가 쉬워로 와데 당진이 얘는 나도 자신은 제대로 되자디 기거라 성게 좀 되자디 거라 나지리스 갈 강가 고야 성어죠 말에 어디 되자다 샤폴 샤야데 당지디 안 되자게 어디 되자디 차스 샤야 뭐 때문에 당지디 되자디 차거라 다디 자와도 차고야 이제 가봐 샤르슨 당지디 탐보여서 인도자게레스 인도자게 차레스
알아 샤발레 차베 차과데 당지 말해서 차과데 right. What Geshe wants to clarify is that basically because of our grasping at self of a person, right, that gives rise to the attachment of all kinds. So your attachment to the hamburger, you are savoring every bite and you want more bites. He didn't say that. I'm just adding here things, right, to spice up. That attachment is not a grasping at the self of a phenomena. That attachment is an outcome of grasping at the self of a person. Does that clear? Yeah. Follow-up question, and then we'll go back to him. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Then what is the grasping phenomena then if it's
Good. Okay.
You
In
know,
that particular case.
in
you know,
that
right?
particular
Okay.
case,
right.
right?
다른 데게 샤발레 사베칼 차바제되어 와게.
맞아요.
네 가블이야 안에 추억의 당진이 가봐요. 그래서 그러 배나
네.
강사의 당진이 고하게 차과제는 샤발레 차바제로 와게.
네, 네.
이내 추억의 당진이 네 가블 열어 말해서 오다.
근데 거기 배 냠도 돼 용고 말다. 거기 내가 쉐 단디 째기 강사 단디 째기 시험도 거기 현직도 깨서야 돼. 이렇게 좀 말이시라.
노죠.
동부 다 지당 다 깨리 마시야마 참디 가서 단디 깨치 단지 올때 신은 동부 깨리 마셔야 단지 깨 올시고로
나래.
어디 깨는 거기 깨대 시면 디 내가 될 삭배 내가도 코로 내가 될 다 가서 거기 콘도 뇌자마도 이네 삭바다 콘도 띵이다 피지 대무어집에 당시 피지 삭마래 지단데 이네 콘도다 뇌자고 당시 아이면서 도저도 열에
노죠.
열디다 폐샤하셔는 이네 당시다 뇌자인 게 와도 삭어
알지 지단겐디 당지가 추억 당지 강사 당지니가 니가 냠도 깨고 왜 캬바서 깨요 말 와게.
요말
고림 간 예제스 깨요 말
고림
추억 당지
예.
강사 당지 깨고 용거 와게.
레레 섬들 강사 당시 깨야 근데 풍벌 현에 에는 간지 깨야 열어
나래.
간지니 깨는 가자시고 이게 풍벌 현에 깨야 열어
나래.
케이스야
Awesome. Geshe says, not every case of that experience necessarily have to have both graspings arise all together. It is possible sometimes, as we talked before, one order of occurrence happening, arising, is that grasping at the self of a phenomena arises first, and then grasping at the self of a person. But in other cases, it could be the other way around. Grasping at the self of a person arises first, gives rise to grasping at the self of a phenomena. But not in every given situation, both graspings necessarily have to be present. One could be present, and that gives rise to other delusions like attachment and anger, right? And so now, sometimes there's a debate about, is there a grasping kind of in the sort of a form of attachment of anger? But overall, people, they say there isn't such a grasping, but there's some kind of a, some people think maybe there could be possible to be. But the overall position is there isn't a, grasping in the form of attachment or the grasping at true existence, I should say, in the form of attachment or anger. Yeah. Yes.
Well, my question has to do with there's an addiction to the cravings to satisfy the physical body.
Yes.
How does that fit into this?
Say it one more time.
To your explanation on these phenomena, isn't that something that we have to get beyond addictions to cravings of satisfying different aspects of the physical body?
Okay, I see. 알로코랑 디스고 다 단데 디데 제위 체베네게 당아서 베나 칼라사야를 써버 딜다 착바다 착신지요로 와게 이나다디 갈서고래 디게 다양스 갈서고래 디로 와게 가서 이나다 루소야를 써버 딘데게 양고 거주지도 요로 와게 이나다 착바디 세바디 뱃콜은 도고고 딜야 탐진 마서 트레버치고 그래서
어디 시고 나 시다데 서원님에 강가 고디고로 제가 코로나에 고주 디데게 제가 신의 항상 해바시무시하죠 말에 어떻게 샤바시라
So what Geshe says is like, of course, the fact of the matter is that our body needs sustenance. We need to eat all of those things because there's a need for that. But from our spiritual point of view, the craving is something we need to get rid of, right? It's something that we should work at and overcome, right? Because there's no need for craving to satisfy our needs, so the physical or whatever needs may be. Yeah, that's that. Could you give the mic to let me?
To go back to the hamburger.
Okay. See, it works.
So, well, this is a quote from Buddha Palitas, okay, that the commentary on Buddha Palita. In the second, so it's first he gives the quote from Nagarjuna and then comments on that, and it says that conceiving unskilled person whose eye of intelligence is obscured. That
Hold
sentence.
for, what page number and where are you?
210.
Okay,
The last.
210, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So unskilled persons whose eye of intelligence is obscured by the darkness of delusion conceive of an essence in things,
Yes.
and then generate attachment and hostility in regards to them.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so that means that basically, again, the hamburger, we're perceiving the hamburger to have an essence.
Mm-hmm.
And then, according to this quote, then we generate the hostility. It has
Attachment.
nothing attachment and hostility. It's not so much the attachment to the self, but immediately perceiving the hamburger as having an essence. First of all,
okay, okay. Yeah, I got it,
existing intrinsically,
Yes, yes,
existing
yes, yes.
intrinsically as a delicious thing,
Yes,
and
yes,
all
yes,
these
yes.
things
Sure.
accumulate eventually.
I
yeah.
got your point, yes.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
다다기게 가르쳐고래 부다팔리다기 단다 사셰기 디직송바저와게
말해.
공부루루기 에네 가르쳐고래 다베 텐델로 서버게 베망고 디르존나 체과 가르쳐데다 셈제 트여데 송바와게
말해.
다다 제디기 룽디나 디싱고도와게 다 단다 가르쳐고래 다체 탐제 간저기 다게 조다버와게 랑신 주바 템바루버와 마이 조다서버와 어디지 진짜 다기게 샤발레들 양조 자나서버와게 다기게 겐 가르친 거에서나 말아서 강사 당제 슈크침베 예베 온기 겐기 착바제디 착바방게 베나다 샤발레 착게 착고 지르슬버와게 코랑 라베네 베나 디기 룽데라 자바이나서버와게 베나 샤발레 차샤바이나와 샤발레데 코랑리아 아니 가서 닝부 여버스톤 다 닝부스데 템베모버와게 닝부디 예베 왕기 착바제로와게 그래서 착바제데 샤발레리아 닝부 여버스톤데 착바제마다 강사 당진이로와게 착바제데 말로 와서 거다
아니. this 다 샤바라 데라다 조데 나가서 데데네 돕질 시네 애니들 샤바지오로와 다 샤바로 그런 데는 섬도는 지발 샤바로 그런 저거 제가 힘보 요르디 힘보 디가 되자 저저 데 퇴바 더다 사고 샤바라 그런 데는 좋다 와라 겨요 뭐 인가 시소데
알아노서
예 나를 차니 샤바를 샤바다
샤기지가 샤발레를 차베 차바되게 되자 예면디 추가 당지 책을 책 말게
뭐자 당지 차 말이 되자랑 차
맨 샤발레디 랑신 마두나 랑신 주바테 로게
처분당하다 그런 샤퍼를 저거자 좋아지어디 좋아디 그런
랑을 줘봤대.
예버지 난거와 나뭐 진라고 말다
나래
되자와 난 됐나 때는 any this 되자 쇼셔로와
뭐라래
또 this
나래 다음에 샤발레 코나 랑을 주베 진바 jungur 용어 말게
그런 다 처분당하 때는 진스다 말다 조조디 샤퍼를 랑을 주바 진게데 당진디 셔와
디데 당진디 추가 당지 말와
당진디 다 군농에도 저희 당진에 샤쇼데 강사 당지 샤다 조조 강사 당지 샤로
알아노서
나가 시스템 들어와 강사 당지 때는 에는 그날 비게 고야 강아지 수드다 아니 비게 뭐버저 가르쳐는 뭐버디 연대도 이용 샤중세 연 텔레 드로탄 퇴버 통해서 샤워로 당지 들어와 어떨 때는 샤워 죽시고 이래서
알아노서 what Geshe says is, I mean, but that is because of the, grasping at the self of a person, right? Because to fulfill all the needs of that person, then we have all this attachment to hamburger, whatever other things. It is possible that because of those graspings, the hamburger appears as intrinsically essential, whatever, right? Intrinsic reality, right? It appears. And that might accentuate the attachment, right, to the hamburger still, right? Hamburger itself appears to have essence, although it does not, because of the grasping, right? And, it superimposes essence onto the hamburger. Then hamburger appears to be essence, right, full of essence, and that might accentuate both the attachment to the hamburger. So it could work that way too.
Well, but that means that the grasping itself is primary, and then the grasping at phenomena is secondary. Whereas earlier we heard exactly the opposite.
Right.
It first grasping at phenomena that
yeah,
causes.
I got it. Yeah, tanda de bena shabale cha shabende tagin tama de ken keberin ba shedo karo wage. Chö ga tangzi ki an kansa dangi ki usla ro. Da tanda shabale cha shabene ro wage. Kansa ga tangzi de ken jen di shedo chö ga tangzi kebe so de cha yung go so.
다다 된대 가르 다다 최들 강사 깨어서야 돼 통맥에서 들어와 봤다는
어떻게 저
가지요 말씀이와 또 다다 깨어서야 돼 그래서 디스월이 동보 발레 시베 이니 비게 발레 거는 니즈를 개와 지 당지들 나네와 뜻노 때는 in the Shakbat Shukshibu Jigresota.
So, right.
The Pashapalator, that Chapel did show in this, but the Chapel do the show in that she does this or Shagrova.
Rwa. 어제 저거. 자 발레를 차 당지 저거.
예.
아 진짜 딱 강사가 당지 그 최당지 템베서 차를 저거.
말에 다 당진인데 거사 당진은 다 시 당진은 지단직 말이지. 꼭 로도도 미샤는 미지 시과라와.
맞진다직 말로.
지단직 말서 다 로도도 거사 당진 당은 이게 시 당은 이게 간지 샤팔레 샤워를 샤베나 샤팔레티 로당게 되게 힘로 거는 세르게 받도 너야르부터 페이지 될 샤고다. 시 당진 샤그로와.
알아서.
그러와.
뭐서.
어디다 넣어야되는 애는 뇌자 숙셔보기고 그러시려와. 그때 로드부 태웠다면은 애는 뇌자들이 숙셔보기고 말이지. 시골다.
저자마다 그냥 단도 고림 스튜디오 갈마다 코나스 집어댔던 거게. 되게 땅마다 게 그런 스튜디오 갈 추억 당진기 강사 당진기 나와게. 다 단도 샤발레 차샤베나 땅가서 저디 강사 당진 디기로 와게. 디기 더바카에 셔도 아니 샤발레 차베 차고 끼스라고 와게. 딱압 될이야 강사가 당진에 연디기 추억 당진 잼베서리서 와. 차버시 거라고 말게.
대대 용서를 다 배당 덤보 가사 취당이지. 대대 나가시데 나 사야 등야 상모데 대대 진짜 탑주시 에디샤 벌레 라와르이노. 엔 조조르베 나데 투어와. 다다 샤벌레 거 투버는 게 뜻은 디셔이 당서 거.
아 샤발레 수랑 시르만 남
와서 나거와.
알아.
대대 뇌자 코는 라 나셔고. 상 저거와. Konana zingu marwa.
Right, it's a bit, I think, complicated, but hopefully I'll do justice here as Geshe was trying to explain it. Earlier, what we said is in terms of the arisal of the two graspings, generally speaking, the grasping at the self of phenomena arises first and the grasping at the self of person, because the notion of person is contingent upon his or her aggregates, right? But which is still true in this particular case, right? But at the same time, now the person is severing the hamburger like anything, right? The extra attachment. So that attachment could also be due to Geshe feels that maybe the grasping at the self of phenomena as well, right? So it's possible for that. Yeah. Yes. Can you give the mic here? Yeah.
So there's part of the teaching I didn't get straight.
Okay.
So it says, grasping as true existence is not a cognitive obscuration, but afflictive emotion.
Yes.
For arhats, they do not have afflictive emotions, but they have cognitive obscurations.
Yes.
So does that mean phenomena appear as truly existent for them,
Yes.
and yet they don't grasp at them?
Okay.
And how does that work?
Okay, sure. Thank you. By the way, before I translate that, I think we should all try hamburger today and find out. There's that. Dike kona kandi shwe dire ta tagi karisung wir sidu kan liya dira wa gen ta tinju lu shi sha ro wa gen ane the ka tenzin sen ne mindu ta tangze se di ke ane shiti mare nyun di res la ro wa gen se sa ane pena 가르쳐 그러다 차좀바 아니 뉴디 방사바 되게 될이야 아니 디 박자시오레스 박자 디 왕기 엔체 탐제 랑신두바 템버두 능거스라로와 세잔 딘데 차좀바 되게 될 낭바 잠레 양 딜이 템버두베 짐바디 요르요 말서 쳐 라 yeah, they don't have the grasping at the self of phenomena. The phenomena appear as intrinsically existent, but they don't have a grasping. The arahats, right, who are free of the delusions. Yes. Does that answer your question?
So does that mean phenomena appear as truly existent, but they know they don't truly exist?
Di kariside Quran giro wage tembar nang ba yina tembar zimba me ba di ko di kasa tembar duba me ba ha kwazan di cha de res wo da.
어때 다그 그래서는 그 딘지고는 그래서 방사로와 딘지 방사도 그 딘지야 용마로와 딘디 방사디 농디상래 인 데마서바 난거로와
ene tembar
농라는 심어 주마타고 세야 난거 다 관심 한도 시에다서와 어디다
right ali chide ko ta ina ko tembar mandu ba yin ba de chen de ko di ge chi de so yeah this is where often in the Buddhist literature we use this language where in certain state of mind or a meditative state or experience that things might appear to you like an illusion, isn't it? So this is what has exactly happened for the arhats. They're completely free of afflicted emotions. So it means they don't have grasping at true existence. But still, because of that imprint, things could appear to them as truly existent or intrinsic existent, but they don't have any grasping anymore. But for them, things appear more like an illusion, isn't it? It appears in one way, but then they know it doesn't exist in that way. Right, yeah.
어때 남긴 가서 빼디 하면 돼요. 빼는 가서 매도 남의 매도 지 샥제라 아니 남의 매도 봐 기사나 지금에는 그 정화돼 되길래 우리
No.
어디 빼시거라.
Right. To kind of, illustrate what the imprint, maybe looks like or feels like or smells like, I don't know. Like say, if, we put like this, like a scented flower in something, then after you take the flower out, still you can smell the scent, isn't it? So the imprint is like that, there's some kind of smell there, left, Can you get back to, let me.
About this phenomena appearing as an illusion to our heart, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that phenomena appear exactly the way they appear to us? The illusions appear real.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there's no such thing as appearing as an illusion.
Right.
They may know it's an illusion, but
Sure.
phenomena appear real, right?
Okay,
Exactly. What does appear?
So again, tanda delia touchon balia da tenzin pangsa wa ge ina paksa wang ge chue tamje temba du baran shiru ban nangyo sla wa gyumata bu rese de ta gyumata be koden de kar resa ga wa kozo la nang da de temba du nang da de nganzo gibu phemal temba du nang ba nang shi chik ba chik ya de kar de so da
다 내가 저나 스도 나야 돼 지발에. 지발에 다그 내가 매버 그런 것은 또 사이인자. 엔 주마다 부세 되게 나들 힘을 거 나와다 매버 람상 그 내다야 셔고로 와.
no so
주마다 부세 되면다. 같이 가다자 주마세야 되지.
gyuma kan tala na shi jo
이나 나야 나신지 요 말어 봐. 자
ta gyuma kan la ge tala nang tala shenba me so cha wo de
어다 주마 그 달라 나리디 그러 달라 매버 다 맥레바티는 다고 달라기 셴바자 레터요 뭐라 그런 주의로 와.
네.
그죠?
네.
어때 나이셔. 나야도 코나 난거로 와. 달라.
원에 더 무슨 나오면 원에 매번 다
뭐네라지 난거르다. 뭐네 뭐도 코나 힐 위해서 그 대바신 거 말아 봐.
Yeah, for them, when we say that things appear like an illusion, well, because of that imprints, things appear to them as truly existent, just like to us. But because of their realization of selflessness, right, the impact of that is that they know it's not real. It's just like the magician, right, who has created these elephants and horses, looks like elephant and horses, and everybody who got tricked by the magic, we think, oh my gosh, real horse. But these appear as horses and elephants, but the magician knows, I just created them, they're not real, right? So he has that belief, right? I'm the one who's tricking here, right? So that kind of thing, yeah.
So they know.
Yeah, they know. Yeah.
It's not that they
Yeah, exactly. Yes, at the back, please. Yeah, I think it's on.
So is it like if I am the actress and I'm in a movie and I am playing a role,
Yes.
and so I'm aware that I'm playing this role and I'm eating this, and this is real chair that I'm
Right.
sitting, and this person is real, but then I understand that I'm playing a role. So would that be kind of a example?
The example of seeing things as illusion, you mean?
Right.
Okay, yeah, sure. 다들 규마ken genang was I your wagon. Digi been a pair of chick dish and that things are long year time your wagon. Long year tap the Galia, so give a chapshun cut and cut wagon. Give some cut and a kuja and a yin, that's also the Marawa, remember the Haku war. In top you the Takash tap or again. Or these are cigarettes, they come so Karek, Topshun got a tap with you and a Yimber is not the go in you Marawata.
이 말아 봐.
Or this sorts.
다 디서리래. 단다 유마켄 더 텍스 제 케메라 봐. 다 유마켄 도 ngakse khana mi ji pa shin so da ngo su zan yo mo da long ye sa de ko ji mo ko chen da ya so wo pa ji mo ji ra. da ma ji ji ba de ka ngo su cha de ba ko de pi tham yin yo ma ra da. da thang bu chayin de yo re di pi da ya de tham yin de yo ma ra ba. o de ji ba de re da.
Yeah, in a sense, we could use that example too, right? How the actors and actresses play different roles, right? And they have to really depict the role almost like real exactly, but then they know they are not the real, right, kings and, well, he didn't say the kings and queens or the devils or whatever they are, right? They aren't. So that's kind of, thing,
We talked about today removing ignorance, and there's lots of advice out there what is an act or a small meditation that Geshe could recommend for us that we could do on a daily basis in order to remove ignorance and yeah,
Sure.
I think just something we could do daily, especially for people with lots of responsibilities they have to tend to,
Yeah.
a movement towards removing ignorance.
Sure. Quran condition the direct that in the anzo karso gore ta tongme mariba rawage mariba da chi ki shin yu sun chung ya da ta mariba li ya anzo karso gore ke me so ya ji sung ba rawage mo Quran se de ta ni re ta Quran se mi se so ba je go rawage e kon zo le game mang bo den de chi tu ka ya ni re de li ya kom tap de bo ro rawage mariba li ya ta karso gore khap de cha ya se den kom tap de bo ro kari cha yo na sa
다 머리가 하고야 된다라.
다 하고에 다 가린다 그 맵스에서 로하게 가린 곰답다 보던 가르치는 사니리
굶답 되면서는 다 가르쳐 그러고 다 대시고 머리 뭐 그런 다 갑자기 가르쳐는 대시고 다 소리게 나가서 롤 간제로 차거든. 그래서 다 차루 타서 차루는 희지군에 딱딱 들이 유사를 위해서 다 가자 무슨 짓을 들이러 와. 나 차다 가려서는 나 쓰잖아 피지 데르러 소소 비게 소도 초알에 로스럽지 나세 샤워라 다 소도 초알에 로스 나세지 이나 인 소도 초알에 풍봉아가 파샤네 인 나세지 요거 티 매번가서 피지 리벨로 로로 와 그러다 풍봉 로스 배다 하고 와 다 되네 다 풍부 로르면 풍부 땡는 다다 배시 되래다 풍부 땡는 다 동서 이게 와랑이 메신 풍부 강을 하고라 다 풍부 로스도 하고 말아 그래서 풍부 땡네 예바지 제 요래도 죽차고서 다 풍부 땡네나 이 지당 비리벨 남지온데 다 풍부 땡네 풍부 직타데도 니무 히로사 말아 다 찍인세나 이 풍부가 예와시디 내 나대 나상이도 여면은 나직 무심해서 풍부대 직 무심해서 어디에 누지 인스티튜트 된서 도로 왔다 디데도 셰네 지도지 저도 왔다 디데 제고레스
다 남주게 간저 미제나 거두 그 소화 숙성분들 된데도 가라 식다도 야고지로하게
아니 대 나세 숙셔 간데 당당 세루레서 그러와 세루데야 디 소바도디야 숙체는 약고 숙수는데 셰도 가자 군지 셰도 가고 싶어요 하려고 와 가자 군지잖아 인코 매도야 레라야레스 가자 군지 가야레스 도와 어쨌든 다 척슈도 차도 다 헌지
So what Geshe feels is that for us the first challenge is to be able to get a good sort of understanding of what that ignorance we talk about today, So which usually requires some kind of analytical meditation, So maybe we can do this kind of reflection that, sometimes we can just kind of look at ourselves, right? Who am I, or what's the self, right? How does it exist? Does it exist? The way it really appears to us is like this fixed entity that is very autonomous and independent of our body and mind, as if it could exist on its own, right? But in reality, we can all easily know that apart from our body and mind, right, psychosomatic aggregate, there isn't something called me or I, right? That's kind of easily. So then the next one we want to is like most of the difficulty is we think that, well, it can be found, within our body and mind. It's not separate from body and mind, but it's somewhere, right, in the body and mind. And so in which case, again, we analyze and say, well, if the self were to be found within body and mind, then it would have to be either one with the body and mind, right, identical completely, or it would have to be separate, different from, isn't it? So if it were to be identical, then the issue we find is that the body and mind become one, right? They are not, right? But if it were to be many, just like 5 aggregates, then there has to be 5 eyes of the self, So this is a kind of analytical sort of analysis usually when we do to look at how we are grasping at, how we see the I or the self to exist. But maybe, how should I say, more relatably for us is like when a lot of ups and downs are happening in our life, right? The excitement and the bad days, whatever. At such time, if we can take, we can seize the opportunity to look at our I or the self. How do we really see ourselves when we are very happy, too excited, or when we are too sad, or too depressed, right? Then we might be able to get a better sense of, right? So this, but we have to be very skillful in it. A part of our mind has to look at what it is. That's the challenging part. If we exert too much effort, analysis, we lose it, isn't it? But if it's too weak, then we can't see it. So it has to be very proper how we use a part of the mind to spy upon, so to speak, how we feel I is in happy and sad occasions, isn't it? So this is why our masters say it's very difficult in the beginning for us to identify precisely, the object of negation. Once we identified it, thereafter it's very easy to know that it doesn't exist, right? To know that it doesn't exist is the easy part, but to be able to identify the object of negation or the intrinsic self is very difficult. Because if we use too much analysis, we lose it. If it's too weak, we don't see it. So we have to be very skillful in that. So maybe we can do that, right? A little bit every day, like, just try to find some time to look at how do I perceive myself, Okay, we will stop there today. Thank you very much for reminding the time. Thanks for all your wonderful questions, and so we'll do our usual dedication prayers in Tibetan, English, and Vietnamese. Kange lo de dim yen din de nyin da nam da rab se be jin yen dung gun ji she si she ni je tu ga le bam ze kan da si be zo ra men don dong le ye ze be ro zo fyong la bo je da ze yan la tu ju yang de Lo da che ro nye mo nye lo le ye cha ro dun ze che ma re me se dung en xin ye jun ze ra de na de ne da je sa ju da ze yun de ju da ju da ju ni yen de da lu me se ja yang la de om ara ba za na de 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 Omaram banza na de senden köye kera öze ye dalu temo memba rase kada tenje shunlo doba lode bobe na sendo zo lode gaze udon bega de gesan konve chudo memba tenba zinla wangdo jicho be tanyen shogun jo so wan de Obeisance to Manjushri.
Tầm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quang lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo. Từ tim Ngài Bát Nhã Kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báu, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thủ thắng, cùng đại bi Ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử. Tiếng rồng vang Ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp báu, gồm trí tuệ Ngài trật tích vô minh. Ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân Ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin Ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi. Con khẩn cầu Di Gót Sen bậc đại trí, bàn pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như rượu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thủ thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh Ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lốp Sang Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Chanju senjo rinpoche, ma ye ba na ye yo je, ke wa nyam ba me wa yang, gong ne gong pe wa yon, tong ye da wa rinpoche, ma ye ba na ye yo je, ke wa nyam ba me wa yang, gong ne gong pe wa yon, sa ji be ji ju ji me do zhang, ri ra ling xie nian de yin ba, sang ye xin do mi de wi wa yin zhu, xue wa yong, kan ri ra wi guo wi xin gang de, pen dang de wa ma lu zhong wei ne, xian re zi wang din zin jiang zuo ye, xia wei si de ma天君节一当古如热那曼的那个尼安达呀。